Okay. So really, it's welcome to everybody. And after we haven't learned together for so long, it's almost like in yoga. In the yoga class, you've got to start slow because everybody's stiff. They haven't done yoga for a while. People are out of shape. And so even with our learning, we kind of have taken a little bit of a break, and now we're getting back into it. So there's lots of themes to pick up on and lots of different topics to discuss. So the one topic that's always of interest is that now we're in the period of counting the Omer, and we know that it's these 7 weeks that we count day by day, trying to actualize the accomplishments of the first night of Pesach. And the first night of Pesach, we get an experience of redemption. And that experience is kind of a gift. And it's a gift because it's a night of revelation. It's a night corresponding to when God himself, not an angel, not a seraph, not anything else, when God, Hayakova, welcome, when God took us out of Egypt, the night of Seder night, and that night echoes down through all the generations of a night of tremendous opening, a tremendous portal that allows us to reach incredible places. And what does it mean that we get to reach places? So I don't know for everyone if it worked that way or it didn't, but sometimes during that night, during the process of telling stories, trying to make it relevant to our life in these days, in these times, we can have an insight on the night of Seder that can give us some awareness of what's keeping us in our personal lives not as fully expressed as we can be, not as fully close to Hashem as we can be, not as fully connected to our souls as we can be, and maybe, and you can put up a hand if you had such an experience, you could just put up a hand, to get some kind of opening of an understanding of where you can open more, or where you can get rid of some old limiting belief or something that's been keeping you smaller or more distant from your essential self. So did anyone have such an experience during Yom Tov? Because, oh good, I see Yaakova did. Anyone else? Because Pesach can be a lot of things. It's family, it's storytelling, it's sharing, but this idea of something liberating and redemptive obviously is something that if we can have it, it's a wonderful experience. But even if we had it, and even if we didn't, what happens is that after that night of revelation and expansion and openness, we then get 7 weeks to, hi, sorry, welcome back, hi. We get 7 weeks to take that insight, take that opening, take that experience of redemption and really ground it, make it real, mida by mida by mida. And we've gone through this many times, that each week we're working on a particular quality, and that quality is something that's going to enable us to be liberated in our lives, be free to be connected to our authentic self, and be free to worship Hashem, and be free to stand in our truth. So we're counting week by week now, and the first 7 days we looked at the quality of chesed, being kind, being connected to other people, reaching out, trying to overcome the separation and the boundaries that keep us distant from other people. And in general, we know that holiness is always connected to connection, that the more we separate from other people, the more we not connected to community, not connected to Hashem, not connected to all the parts of us. In a way, and we'll talk about this next week with the Parsha of Kedoshim, when we talk about what is holiness. So holiness is an interesting paradox of separateness. You separate what's special. So there's an aspect of separating from kind of everything else to be unique and to be special. But holiness also is a kind of a unity and a coming together within oneself, within one's tribe, with unity with God. So there's an interesting thing. So chesed is what enables us to bond and to connect and to reach out to others. So that was last week, and maybe you jumped on the count. Sometimes you forget in the beginning and then you kind of miss the whole train, because if you don't count all the days from the beginning, you can't count with the blessing. But if you haven't been counting the days till now, you can still jump on. You can count the days, but you don't say the blessing. By the way, there's lots of apps that help you count. And if you put them on your phone, they send you little reminders, or you see what the count is for each day. So anyway, so say again, Susan?
Everybody that's on knows that we're counting it all.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to introduce, this idea that we're counting. And I'm just trying to think if I can send a link. I don't know if I have a link on my app.
Do you have the Omer counter?
Well, I have one Omer counter. I don't know which one it is. It's got a little, oh, well, you can't see. It's got a little wheat.
Me too. That's mine. Yeah, brown and green.
Yeah, with a little.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we send that link to everybody, but if you haven't been counting, you can jump on now. You just don't count with the blessing. And the idea is that we're counting all the days until the next holiday, which is the holiday of receiving the Torah, which is 49 days after that night of the Seder. And the next holiday, of course, is Shavuot, when we receive the Torah. But in any event, so each week we get to focus on a different quality. And the week that we're in now is, in a way, a confusing quality. A lot of people don't really understand it very well. And that is the quality, the emotional midah of gevura. Gevura, gevura. I don't know how there's any other way to say it, gevura or gevura. So that is the capacity to say no, and the capacity to make boundaries, and the capacity to hold a space. So let's say you go to a retreat center and the person wants, the head of the retreat wants to hold a meditation circle, and there's lots of noise in the area, and there's kids coming and kids going and balls bouncing and a lot of noise. So it's impossible to have a meaningful meditation circle in that situation. You kind of got to create boundaries and ask certain people to go somewhere away. And then if people want to come and join and they're not going to be quiet or they're going to be disruptive, so you've got to be able to say, I'm sorry, this space is a sacred space. We're doing a meditation here, and please, can you go, or can you at least stay but be quiet? And you make those boundaries in order to have a space that can facilitate something happening. So that capacity to make boundaries, and maybe to ask someone to leave, or to tell somebody, you know, you're welcome to stay, but you have to switch off your music or switch off, you know, stop what you're doing because it's disruptive. That capacity to make boundaries is called gevura. Gevura is also translated as strength. It's also, and people often think that it's a masculine quality. And people think, ironically, that chesed is a feminine quality because women are very kind and loving and giving. And gevura is a masculine quality because it's identified with strong, and a gibor is a warrior, and that it's a masculine quality to have gevurah and a feminine quality to have chesed and be kind and outgoing. But actually, the inverse is true. In fact, chesed is a masculine quality. A man can impregnate, I'm sorry, it's a very graphic example, but it does help to illustrate the point. A man can impregnate 100 women. He can just go and keep going and give and give and give and impregnate, and he can do it all, one after another without any limitations. A woman can only have one child or one pregnancy at a time. Maybe she can have, twins or triplets or quadruplets or whatever, but it's basically one pregnancy in which she has that space and she nurtures one pregnancy at a time. This is very different. She's got this womb room space, and it's actually the woman who makes boundaries a lot of times. A man has a lot of ideas and a lot of plans and kind of abstract thinking, and it's the woman who says, let's bring that down into reality, and what's that going to look like, and I often have used the example of a man says, let's make Lag BaOmer gathering, and then the woman says, okay, well, I need to get tables and I need to go get the meat and I need to organize the salads and the details and bringing things into reality. That's a woman quality. So that's the week that we're in. We're in the week of Gevurah, and now because the day, it's a little confusing because one day is ending and another day is starting. So it's already kind of dark enough that we can count the 12th day, but I'll talk about the 11th and the 12th day of this count, because the 11th day was Hod of Gevurah, Netzach of Gevurah, and the 12th day is Hod of Gevurah. So Netzach of Gevurah Gevurah is that in my attempt to become disciplined, to become, to embody this quality of Gevurah into my being, I have to be consistent and I have to be persistent. And if I'm trying to make boundaries with my children, Netzach of Gevurah is when I stick to those boundaries. I told my child, need to come home by 12:30, and unless you do, there's going to be a consequence. And then Netzach is kind of like sticking with that and not being committed with the Gevurah. And Hod is the capacity in one's Gevurah to appreciate and acknowledge and hear the rest of the story in a way. So Netzach is kind of, I'm sticking to my guns and I'm being persistent, consistent. I'm not allowing my commitment to flay. Is that the right word? And Hod is, I'm seeing and acknowledging and opening to a bigger story, which might actually require me to change my position because I'm hearing and perceiving something other than what my own understanding was initially. So playing with both of those ideas. And just in conclusion, one more thing that I want to say is that one of the analogies I've heard about Gevurah is if we think about a river running through a river of energy, so Gevurah would be the banks of the river holding that water kind of in its place. If the banks of the river would just kind of totally just kind of melt away, so that water it becomes a bog or a swamp, and all that water in the river that's been channeled through the strong boundaries of the walls of the river, that water just seeps into, becomes just something else, not a river anymore. So that's the boundaries, that's the strength of Gevurah that help that river go from where it's starting to where it's needing to go. So that's so that is an idea of that. So any questions about the counting before we move on? Any questions about the counting?
What does Omer mean?
Omer. Oh, so thank you for that question. So if without explaining that, the whole thing doesn't make so much sense. So Omer is a kind of a grain. I think it's barley grain. And basically, this is that for Pesach, they couldn't have any, the grains that they used were wheat grains, but everything had to be done, you know, in a way that it doesn't become chometz stick. And then we counting 50 we counting 50 days to the Omer, to the offering that's done with barley. And so it's did I say that originally, that it's barley? So we're counting until this other offering that's going to be a barley offering. And so I actually, let me just check that.
Omer mean measure?
Stuff. Sorry?
Doesn't Omer mean measure?
Yes, it does actually. So let me just check it, because let me just make sure that I'm telling you the right thing. So yes, I think Omer does mean measure. So let me just read to you here a few different things. So it starts with the wave offering of a sheaf of ripe grain. And after that, there's a korban. So it's a grain offering. It starts with the grain harvest. And then we're going all the way till the Shavuot offering, which is going to be a different offering. So let me just see, this is not a very comprehensive, let me see, so, okay. So let me see, it is, okay, so let's see. So it's the counting of the Omer is the 49-day period between Pesach and Shavuos. It marks the beginning of the barley harvest, when in ancient times Jews would bring the first sheaves to the temple as a means of thanking God for the harvest. And the word Omer literally means sheaf and refers to these early offerings. So I think I got it wrong, and I had a sense that I was getting it wrong. I think by Pesach, they bring the barley harvest, and then, so just, so, okay. I've learned this so many times and taught it so many times that I'm actually getting a little bit mixed up. So the word Omer literally means a sheaf, and you shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach, when an Omer of grain is to be brought as an offering. Then you count 7 complete weeks, and the day after the 7th week of your counting would be the 50th day, and then you bring a new offering. So one of them is a barley and one of them is a wheat. So let's just make sure we know which one is which. In the biblical context, this counting appears only to connect the first grain offering at the peak of the harvest, and then the holiday of Shavuos associated with the giving of the Torah, the Omer period. So it's not saying here, but I know that we go from, I think that we start with barley and we count till the wheat offering. I think that's how it goes, because there's all these teachings that I remember that barley is a grain typically given to animals, and we kind of elevate ourselves and work our way up to the wheat offering of Shavuos. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think that's what it is with Omer being a sheaf. And basically it's this process that is refining us as we counting from one kind of grain offering to the next kind of grain offering. So thank you for asking. and I'm sorry that it wasn't clearer on my mind or on my tongue, as they say. So yeah. So here, you shall count from the eve of the second day of Pesach when an omer of grain, and then so yeah. So I'm not getting any more information right away on that.
Okay.
Okay, so okay. So moving now onto the Parsha, and it's interesting because somehow the calendar in Eretz Israel starts to differ a little bit from the calendar in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Israel. So I have an app on my phone, which is a Jewish calendar, and I've made some mistakes from this before because I look at how the dates would be in Israel. So in Israel, this Shabbos, the Parshas Kedoshim, which is all about being holy and begs us to contemplate what it means to be holy and what is holiness. So I started preparing that Parsha, but then I looked at a different source and I saw that actually the Parsha in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, is Acherei Mos, which is after the death. And the death is the death of Aaron's two sons who had this ecstatic experience, or we don't know, let's decide. There's differences of opinions if it was an ecstatic experience or an experience that was supposed to be ecstatic and ended up in a very severe punishment experience. And we'll talk about what that experience was. But in any event, the Hayom Yom of today connects itself to holiness, because on this particular year, when the Hayom Yom was written, the Parsha was Kedoshim and all about holiness. So I'm going to read about it, and we'll talk about both things, because holiness and Aaron's sons and these themes about what is holy and what is too much and too little, and what does it mean to be involved and separated. It's all interesting topics for discussion. So today's Hayom Yom for the 12th day of the Omer. So the permissible, when done for one's pleasure, but only for one's pleasure, is not a good thing. Actually, it's written here, even the words evil. So if you're doing something that's allowed to you, but you're doing it only with self-interest, only with, let's say you're eating something that's kosher, but you're eating it in the way of a glutton, and you kind of not eating it with any holy intent, then that can become evil. As the Alter Rebbe writes in the Tanya in chapter 7, because we are commanded to sanctify ourselves, to make ourselves holy, even in that which is permitted. So even in things that are permitted, there's still a right way, a holy way to do something, and a way that's not holy. One must introduce sanctity into those matters that are permissible, so that they serve the purpose of enhancing one's Torah, mitzvot, fear of Hashem, and good character traits. So that's the Hayom Yom, and it sort of introduces this topic of holiness, which we can talk about a little bit, because it's going to relate to the Parsha of the death of Aaron's sons. So if we're looking for a definition of holiness, what do you think is a good definition of holiness? If I would ask you, what do you think is holy? What would you say?
Elevated thinking and service. We know how to serve God.
Say that again.
I don't know if I could.
Try.
Intentional, utilizing our being to serve a higher purpose according to what we know is true.
Okay, I like that. I think that's a good definition of what it means to try to live a holy life. Anyone else have any idea of the word kedusha or what it means to
I
sanctify?
think it might, if I'm not mistaken, to emulate the way that the mothers and fathers acted, and to like opening up your house for different people and all the time, and inviting them, and things like that. I mean, I think to emulate how the mothers and the imas and the abbas were, that's how I think is what it is. And
Okay, that's actually interesting because the commandment from next week's parsha, which is Kadoshim Tihiyu, it's Kadoshim Tihiyu, you should be holy, Ki Ani Kadosh, because I am holy. So in a way, we're emulating not just the mothers and the fathers, but the self in holy.
Right.
So what is the definition of holy? So one of the definitions of holy is that it's kind of separate. There's an aspect of separateness. Shabbos is a holy day because you have all the days of the week, and then the idea of something being sanctified is it's separated out from the rest and put in a way on some kind of a pedestal. So the Jewish people, Hashem says that you should all be an Am Kadosh. Why? Because I want you to be like me. I want to separate you and put you a little bit separate from the general functioning. So there is an idea of holiness being kind of removing oneself and placing oneself a little above the material, mundane, everyday kind of activity. That's one of the connotations of holy. I like Sandra's definition of opening your house and being, following the example of holy people. But this aspect of somehow separating oneself from the mundane is also an aspect of holiness. So if we look at this week's parsha, and this week's parsha is called let's see, where are we? Let's go. This week's parsha is called Acherei Mos. Acherei Mos. So the parsha basically is to do with the fact that Aaron's sons, trying to be holy, separated themselves in a way that Hashem didn't appreciate. So let's see what happens. So it didn't. So it's just telling us briefly here that Hashem spoke to Moshe. Whenever we share the screen, then somehow, so I see Sandra is there, but she's coming on again. So Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's two sons, when they drew near before Hashem and they died. So like what's happening? They're coming close to Hashem. They want to do something holy and they die. So first of all, we need to know what is it that they did, and then we have to try to analyze, is what they did something we should learn from or something we shouldn't learn from, and were they rewarded or were they punished? And what were they doing to begin with? So the Rashi says to us, first of all, he says the reason, first of all, this happened in last week's Parsha when Aaron's sons died, but now we after the death, and it starts off that Hashem is Hashem is speaking to Moshe and telling him that Hashem is speaking to Moshe, and Hashem is telling Moshe that I want you to speak to your brother, and I want you to tell your brother that if ever he's going to be doing anything like what his sons did, there needs to be very careful guardrails around that kind of behavior so that he also doesn't die. So what did the sons do? So what the sons did is when the temple was dedicated this portable pop-up traveling Mishkan when it was first dedicated in the desert, which now we've been through Pesach and so many things have happened, weddings, Pesach. It seems like we discussed it so long ago, but it wasn't so long ago chronologically in terms of the Torah reading. When that temple Mishkan got dedicated, Aaron's sons got carried away and they took an incense offering and they brought it right into the holiest part of this Mishkan and they died. So now this is after that fact, and Hashem wants Moshe to speak to Aaron and to tell him what not to do. And Rashi says it's kind of like a doctor saying, you know, your friend died, he didn't take care of his health. Now I'm telling you, don't, and it's interesting the things he says, don't eat cold foods, don't lie down in a cold, damp place. So that what happens to you, what happened to your friend doesn't happen to you. Okay, so what kind of things should he make sure to do? So the first thing he says is he shouldn't come whenever he feels like into the Holy of Holies. Now this is interesting because there was a incense offering done regularly in the temple, and we learned that it was done in the morning and in the afternoon. And one of the reasons why it was done was to make sure that this, you know, we were in a desert situation, very hot, raw meat being, animals being killed, and then animals put on fire to be burned. And we've spoken about what that all means. That's, you know, the parallel processes, aspects of our own animal nature being kind of offered up on an altar of service. But could be flies, could be bad smells, could be, you know, it's kind of intense, a little bit of a butcher vibe. And so they're burning this incense all the time to make sure that the clothing of the Kohanim stays fragrant and the environment stays fragrant. Rambam says, don't be silly. Don't think that all this business with the Ketoris is just aroma control. It's way, way, way deeper than that. So, you know, yes, there's that aspect, but it's way, way deeper. So anyway, Hashem wants Moshe to tell Aaron that he shouldn't come just any old time into the Holy of Holies. In fact, we know that Aaron could only go into the Holy of Holies one time a year, and that was on Yom Kippur. That's the only time. And if he goes when he's not supposed to go, then he's going to die. And Hashem even suggests, he says, because I do appear, my holy presence is there in that Holy of Holies. And it would be totally understandable to appreciate that Aaron would want to go in all the time to kind of be exposed to this holy experience, but he cannot, only on Yom Kippur. And then there's a whole lot of things that Aaron has to do before he does it on Yom Kippur. He has to get a young bull and he has to offer that, and he has to wear special clothing. And it's interesting because usually the Kohen Gadol wears 8 garments. He has the 4 white garments of the regular Kohanim, just white linen, a trousers, a sash, a shirt, and a turban. But usually the Kohen Gadol has those 4 plus 4 extra ones that are very fancy. A golden plate that says Kodesh Lashem on his head. He has this plate on his chest that we spoke about that can be used for divination, for getting answers from God on questions. Should we go into war? Shouldn't we? Should we attack today or tomorrow, etc.? He had a special like apron and 4 additional garments. But on Yom Kippur, he mustn't wear anything that has any gold in it, because that will remind God of the golden calf, which we can't remind God about. And so he wears these 4 items of clothing, and he goes to the mikveh, and he does all these things. And then he brings his own sin offerings for his own family and his household. He makes that korban. And then there's this whole thing about 2 goats, and we know the idea of a scapegoat. It comes from this parsha and from the service of Aaron on Yom Kippur, that he picks lots, and there are 2 goats, and he picks lots. And there's a little wooden box, and on one piece of wood that's in this beautiful carved box is something that says La Azazel, which means this rocky cliff that the goat's going to be thrown over. And before that happens, all the sins of the Jewish people are kind of transferred onto this goat, and then he's sent out into the wilderness to be a scapegoat, exactly to be that. So every other time in history when we talk about a scapegoat, it's coming down to this original commandment that Aaron should transfer all the sins of the Jewish people onto this goat and then send it out into the wilderness where there's rocky cliffs and things, and the goat is not going to make it. And through this, all the Jewish people achieve their forgiveness, and they even use a red string, and then the red string turns white to show that the Jewish people's sins have been forgiven. And the other lot in the wooden box says La Hashem, and then he takes that goat and he brings blood from that goat that goat is also killed, but in a different way. It's not sent out into the wilderness to kind of stumble over the cliff. It's actually offered as a korban in the temple, and the blood is sprinkled in a special way. And then he does all of that, and then he does another offering, and then we come to this whole story with the ketoris, the incense. And this incense that Aaron does on Yom Kippur is the same incense that his sons did when they weren't supposed to and they died. So let's just see what it is that he does, and then we'll talk about why they died and what the Rebbe thinks about whether it was a punishment or what we're supposed to learn from it, etc., etc. So he takes a pan full of burning coals from the altar, from the outside altar, and he then takes both hands full of incense. He takes like handfuls of incense, and I have it written down how much that incense is. Somehow, how much is that incense? Quite a lot of incense. 5.28 pounds of incense. That's a lot of incense. 2 big handfuls, 5.28 pounds. I guess he must have had very large hands, or 2.4 kilograms. It's a lot of incense. And he takes this incense and 2 handfuls, and he brings it, and I just have it more detailed over here, what he actually does. He takes 2 spoons containing 2 handfuls of the same incense that is used daily, but for Yom Kippur, it's crushed even more and more refined than usual. And then he puts it on the pan with this and the spoon into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on the floor, beyond this curtain that he usually is not allowed to walk past this curtain. And he puts it on the floor, the burning coals in front of the ark. And then he throws the incense on the burning coals on the pan, and then right away, and there's special herbs and special spices in this ingredients that makes the smoke kind of go up in a big cloud. And there's a big cloud that is formed and envelops the whole ark cover. And amongst other things, this ketoris atones for Lashon Hara, for tale bearing. And he then leaves the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He goes out, he gets the blood from the bull, he comes and he sprinkles it, then he goes out, he gets the goat, blood from the goat, he comes out, he sprinkles it. It's a very orchestrated process. Now, what's the big thing about all this Ketoris? What's the big thing about it? And all of these things are so that Aaron, when he does it, he shouldn't die. Okay, so on Shabbos, this past Shabbos, I was preparing for the Mashiach Suda, which is a wonderful end to Pesach, because as I learned, the 4 cups that we drink at the Seder are the 4 cups of us going out of Egypt. Hashem took us, Lakachti, Hotzeti, Ga'alti, he redeemed us, he took us, he saved us, he brought us. Not he brought us, I'm sorry, he took us, he saved us, but it doesn't say where we're going to. We're just getting out of Egypt. But the going to is the 5th cup. And during the Seder, we have it on the table in the form of the cup for Eliyahu Hanavi, but we don't really talk so much about where we're going to. We say, L'shana haba bi Yerushalayim, and that's where we're going, but it's a lot about where we've come from and how we got out of, and our gratitude and our joy of where we came from. Mashiach Seuda is where we're going to. We're going to Geula, to redemption, to more revelation of Eliyahu Hanavi. So we have not just one more cup, but we have 4 more cups at the Mashiach, which is not a halacha, it's a minhag, that a custom that was originated from the Baal Shem Tov. So in preparing for this Mashiach Suda, I came across a book. I'm trying to find it now online so I can buy it for myself. It's essays that the Rebbe wrote on every parsha, connecting that parsha to ideas of Geula and redemption. And it had a big sticker in the front cover, do not remove from shul. So I was like wanting to use it for my Mashiach Suda, but there was this big sticker, do not remove from shul. So I thought, well, I better not do that. So I don't have it with me, but one of the essays was on this topic. So first of all, let's compare the outer korbanos to the Ketoris korbanos. The outer korbanot offerings were animal offerings done outside of the Holy of Holies that connect to our thought, our speech, and our action. Those are part of us, but they, in a way, they external. How we act, well, can't really say thought is external, but our actions are external, and the animal sacrifices are connected to those actions. We acted incorrectly. We didn't do a mitzvah we were supposed to do, or we did an avera we were not supposed to do. Somehow we didn't do something we should have done, or we did do something we weren't supposed to do, or we saying thank you for something that happened, but it's us, but it's an external aspect of us that connects to the external mizbeach and the animal sacrifices that are outside of the Kodesh Kodoshim. The Kodesh Kodoshim is internal, and the mode of offering there is this incense, and incense in a way permeates and infiltrates all of your being because it's smell. So it goes through your nostrils, it comes into your being, you can inhale aroma and smell, and it can penetrate right into your very being. So the Rebbe said that according to the Rebbe, at least this essay that I wrote, he said that the sons of Aaron didn't die as a punishment for behaving incorrectly. They died because they had their souls left their bodies, and they just had ratzuv, running out without returning. They just went without limits to bond with Hashem without any boundaries. They just went and they kept going until they couldn't come back. The Rebbe says that even though we don't want people to do that, we still want people to be inspired by the Ketoris and inspired by a form of service whereby there's no separation between us and our mitzvahs, that our mitzvahs permeate us completely like the Ketoris, that those boys, those sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, that they were so intent on imbuing their whole self with spirituality that they went for this offering without being commanded, and they stretched themselves and opened themselves. And the Rebbe says we need to learn from that the way of Ketoris is going to be the way of Mashiach times. Not that we're going to be giving the offering of Mashiach, of incense all the time, but this complete merging with our actions, that it's not going to be, I'm here and my mitzvahs are there. There's going to be this full communion with what we're doing, and there's not going to be separation in the way of the Ketoris. On the other hand, people say it was a punishment. And why was it a punishment? Because the idea of service in this world is not to run just to holiness. It's to pull back, to have that gevura, to stay in the world and fix the world and transform the world and elevate the world. And so the Jewish way is not to yearn, well, one can yearn, but not to idealize sitting in a way on a mountaintop, being alone and just meditating all day and praying all day and not being challenged by relationships. You know, a lot of spiritual people in other religions don't get married and they don't have children. One of the reasons why they do that is children and marriage is a huge distraction. You want to meditate, you want to pray, you want to, you know, be so connected to God. And then you've got to, if you have a wife or a husband, you need money for food, and you have children, you need money for tuition. It can be called or thought of as a distraction. One of the things about Aaron's children is they didn't get married. They didn't want that distraction. They wanted to just be holy. So no, that's not the way we want it to be in our world. We have to work and fix our world. But the Rebbe doesn't want us not to be inspired, but by that desire to be fully connected to what we're doing and fully infused by what we're doing, so that even though we're working in the world, and working in the world is important, in fact, holiness is imbuing every single thing in the physical world with a connection to God. So it's kind of imbuing ourselves in the physical world, connecting that to some spiritual intention, making it separate in that it's special, it's elevated, it's godly, but not because we're running away from the world, but because we're transforming the world and lifting it up onto these beautiful pedestals of specialness. We're taking worldly food and we elevate it on Shabbat. We take worldly clothes and we elevate by wearing nice clothes on Yom Tov and Shabbos, or, you know, we elevate human relations by having mikveh, and we elevate having babies and children by doing a bris and then a shalom zachor and a bat mitzvah and a bar mitzvah, and we elevate relationships by making weddings and making those relationships holy. So we are involved in the physical world, but we try and separate them from just mundaneness by making them special. So what the sons did wrong was that they didn't want to do that work with the worldly, but what they did right is they wanted to be fully connected to their spirituality. So the Rebbe says we want to learn from them to be fully imbued, like the incense surrounds and kind of comes into oneself, but not to the exclusion of our work in the world, which is to deal with relationships, deal with the world, deal with our reality, but do it in a way that we're elevating it and making it holy and making it special. So that's the idea, connecting a little bit of next week's Parsha to this week's Parsha. Next week's Parsha is called Kedoshim. This week's Parsha, Acherei Mos, after the death. And I hope that was informative and inspirational. And if there any,
Do you want to hear something interesting about the topic of
sure.
religious leaders who don't get married? The reason Catholic priests don't get married is because because the church and the priests, they were very wealthy. They owned a lot of land. And anytime when a priest, would pass, he had no heirs, and who would inherit his property or whatever, the land? The church. That's the reason that they don't get married.
Well, that might be one of the reasons. I don't know if that's the only reason, but
I don't know. That's what Rabbi Bloch told us. So.
Well, it does answer some questions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we all about, building families. In fact, I just saw some article or essay that said, if you want to know how to save the world, or in a Jewish way, encourage people to get married and have children, because that's really, the humanizing effort against this digitalizing other effort of less relationships, less children, less human connection, more digital, more substitute, less human, and we trying to assert the other direction, more human contact, more relationships, more children, more humanity, more elevating of the mundane, but not, walking away from the mundane, but on the other hand, not leaving it being mundane. We got to try to elevate it. So yeah. So any other comments or questions? If anybody wants that app for counting the Omer, I can try to send it to you from my phone. Also, last year I introduced to you this beautiful book called The Dance of the Omer.
Oh, wow.
I bought it.
It's a beautiful book. It's by Benji Elson, and it has lovely and
Very
interesting.
Oh wow, look at that. It's so pretty.
Omer, and I think you can buy it on Amazon. It's
Yes.
Susan, did you get it last year? Because I
did.
know
And I actually wrote to him because I was very moved by it. And it turns out here's
somebody's
he
turns out what?
was in a very deep depression, and in writing this book, by doing the steps towards these 49 days and these 7 different realms of being, that he lifted himself out of depression through this journey. It's a beautiful.
Wow, I didn't know that. I actually know his parents because when we lived in Crown Heights, we were friendly with his mother and father, and then they moved to Passaic. And so we lost touch with them, but I know he's got very lovely parents, and I know his mom and his dad. So when I discovered the book, I was very impressed with it. So it's called Dance of the Omer by Benji Elson. I could recommend it. It's a very nice exploration of the different sfirot and identifying different aspects that each day of each week can orientate you towards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I love how you tied everything together, Bracha, just, with Gevura and with, it just is so beautiful. It's all, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Very beautiful.
And it's good to be back.
Yeah.
Yes, it
took a
is.
long break. I meant to, usually I don't take so much of time off for Pesach, but there was just so many things going on.
It was a wedding.
The wedding and Sheva Brachot and, Baruch Hashem. My son met his color and got married to his color in such a everything was so fast that it was,
Mhm.
and in all that time was Pesach and almost Pesach and Purim and like a lot of things. So if we did miss a few more learnings than I would have liked, but
You did it with
thank you for your understanding.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course.
So
So-
it's fine.
yeah,
We're
so
happy for
anyway.
you. We're so happy for you.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Baruch Hashem, a big blessing, big
Lots
revealed
of big
blessing. So
blessings.
wishing everyone a good rest of the week of Gevurah, and then the week after, of course, is Tiferet, which is my favorite. Tiferet is the integration of opposites. You know, we have Chesed on the one side and Gevurah on the other side, or I should say Chesed on one side and Gevurah on the other side, and then Tiferet is how things connect and come together. And Tiferet actually is in the center. So even the other Sfirot, the ones Chochmah and Bina, the intellectual ones, they also connect to Tiferet, and the lower ones also. Tiferet is really like the heart center. One of my friends who does energy work, she feels that Tiferet is more of a solar plexus core fire center as opposed to an air heart center. But both of us agree that Tiferet is the core of the whole system. It's where all the opposite polarities integrate in the middle. So whether it's in the heart, which is really what I think makes sense in my understanding, or it's in the kind of fire solar plexus center, which is what makes sense to her. She's an energy. I'm putting my hands over here for. She's an energy worker, and she actually sees these, you know, energies in a different way. So we have further study to figure out, or you know, maybe the heart center and the fire center kind of come together in some way. So
someone in Israel or someone here?
she lives in Israel.
But I
She doesn't live in Bad Ain. She lives actually in Kiryat Sefer. And
Nice.
she does energy work, and she works with the energy centers. So ether, air, fire, water, earth. And so all of the work is around that. So we have a little machlokes that we have to resolve together. So anyway, so wishing you a good week, and we'll see each
Right.
other next week in
This was beautiful. Thank you.
Spirit.
Thank
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bracha.
Bracha.
Thank you.
And
everybody.
there's
Shabbat shalom,
yoga
everyone.
tomorrow?
Yoga tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
Mhm.
All right.
All right.
So long.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.